Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about how artificial intelligence is boosting cybersecurity in some pretty dramatic ways. We'll look at both the challenges and opportunities for AI and security. To discuss that, I'm joined by Tony Sabaj, Head of Channel Security Engineering for the Americas for Check Point. Tony, very good to have you with us today.
Great to be with you today, James.
I think there's so much going on with artificial intelligence and cybersecurity these days. I'd like to get your sense of the market, but to me, it seems like AI is the great, extender of cybersecurity. We humans can't keep up with all the attacks anymore, so we really need AI to beef up our cybersecurity platforms. What do you see as you survey the market as close as you are to what key trends are driving it here in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, AI is really a game changer, in a number of different industries, but specifically in cybersecurity, both for good and for bad. But what we're seeing, from the good side of things is a lot of solutions out there really harnessing AI to be able to compensate for, lack of, some of the human talent that is very difficult to come by in the cybersecurity industry, and also just the speed and the amount of data that needs to be consumed to be able to provide quality cybersecurity that even with 1 million people, without the ability to go through data quickly in a programmatic way, you're missing out on being able to help drive better cybersecurity within organizations and within the solutions that are being provided.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that's really my sense of it. I'm thinking about, there's the perimeter. The perimeter is experiencing any number of attacks. Maybe some of them are false positives, who knows? But I see this AI network sort of quickly like skittering around the network. Is this for real? What's going on? And also helping to ingest the data, because we humans can't really ingest the data that quickly.
Exactly, and we can't do the pattern recognition and some of the correlation that's done. We cannot do it quick enough. We're still programming the AI algorithms, but
Right.
there's no human on the planet that can programmatically make the assumptions and even do some of the self-learning in real time. That really what separates AI from just automation is really the self-learning and the self-programming of some of these algorithms that are going through the data.
It's really interesting. Well, I think I'd like to get your advice in how companies can select a solution with AI, a cybersecurity solution with AI. And I tell you what I think is the difficult thing for many companies is that all the vendors are saying, "Hey, we've got AI in our solution," but I think it's hard for the customers to really kick the tires and truly do an apples to apples comparison. Vendor A certainly has AI, but how does their AI work? And vendor B also claims to have AI, so how does their AI work? And it's all mixed in with the overall solution. So it's a real challenge for companies for buyers to say, how do I select a solution with AI? What kind of advice would you give?
And there's really 4 things I like to look at when people are touting we use AI, and that's kind of the buzzword du jour.
Right.
I was at RSA earlier this year, and last year it was zero trust. This year it was AI. Everybody had AI this, AI that. There's really 4 things you want to look at when it comes to AI. Is one, there's still humans writing the initial algorithm. So, what is the R&D spend? What is the spend of that organization on actually developing AI? There's a difference between automation, machine learning, and true artificial intelligence. Automation is just using technology to do repeatable known tasks.
Right.
Machine learning is really just taking subsets of structured data and being able to programmatically go through them in a more logical way than just automation. And then true AI is really building self-learning algorithms that are using unclassified data to actually make their determination. So those are really 3 of the biggest things to look for. And then the biggest thing to look for is that AI is only as good as the data that it's being trained on. So you could have the greatest algorithms in the world, but if you're training it on a very small subset of data, the self-learning aspect of that AI isn't going to be as effective as AI that's being trained on large subsets and large amounts of data. And that's the one thing that I think a lot of people don't look at, is where is the training data coming from, and how well is those AI engines across the entire organization or the entire solution set. If you're just looking for viruses and you have an antivirus product, using AV, is it sharing it with your cloud security solutions? Is it sharing it with your network security solutions? Is it sharing it with your email security and SaaS security solutions? So
Mhm.
those are the things that people need to look for. It's not just good enough to have a really fancy AI engine. It's the data and how is the results of that being applied to the rest of the organization.
Well, when I think about the data that it needs to be trained on, I'm assuming that much of that data has to come from the client themselves, right? Because I assume there's a body of industry data that the AI algorithm is trained on, but wouldn't it need to be on client X's own system, that some of that training data?
True. So there's publicly available information out there around threats and those types of things. There's things like Virus Total, which is somewhat public. It's obviously there's a paid for version of it where you can get, you could test samples of code, and there's information and there's data given out by different government and public sector type organizations that
Mhm.
everybody has access to. But really what truly makes the AI more powerful is how much data do you have that other people aren't consuming themselves? So is it coming from, just your customer data as a consumer of that solution? Is it coming as a conglomeration of all of that vendors combined customer data, not necessarily proprietary information, but
Right,
threat information that isn't proprietary to
right.
a specific organization? And how long has that organization been collecting and training their AIs? um, and that's another thing. It's not just the raw amount of data, but how far back does that data go? How real time is it? And how long has that data been around to be able to fully train the AI systems?
Well, then what are some good example answers to those questions? It's like, oh, we've got 3 years of data, we've got X amount of petabytes of data. How can a customer tell the difference between what a good answer to those questions is and what's not so impressive?
Yeah, I mean, you need to look at the longevity of the company to begin with, and how long they've been providing solutions.
Mhm.
So obviously, I work for Checkpoint, so we've been around for 30 years. We have 30 years worth of data that we can train on. Now, obviously, threats that happened 30 years ago are different than threats that are happening today, but it's all
Sure.
part of the learning process. We've been using true AI for a little over 10 years in
Mhm.
our systems. So not only do we have the data, but we have the maturity of the algorithms and the 10 years of self-learning to be able to make some of our algorithms stronger than just about anything in the in the industry. And then also the sheer amount of data. We have hundreds of thousands of customers from a corporate Checkpoint perspective. We have our own research teams that are feeding our AI engines constant data. All they do is research. They're not creating security solutions. They're just doing security research. We have lots of third parties that we work with, and we also have millions and millions of different solutions, points out there on the internet, through some of our own sensors and also through some of our consumer brand, which is Zone Alarm, which is a free security solution that's very great. And we also glean a lot of security data from our consumer based solutions. So we have millions and millions of different points out there currently right now collecting information and feeding what we call Threat Cloud AI, which is our giant data lake of information and AI engines that
Mhm.
are in real time feeding all of Checkpoint solutions.
Interesting. Okay, but I do want to circle back to an earlier point you made about how some vendors, they have, maybe it's machine learning, maybe it's automation, maybe it's true AI. I think that's a big trend in the industry. Some vendors may have simply, machine learning, and they say, "Hey, we've got AI," and it's really just, programmatically sifting through the information without being true artificial intelligence. That's a tricky question for a client to find out. I mean, how can they distinguish whether the vendor has this deep, true, authentic, versatile AI as opposed to merely some helpful machine learning?
It really comes down to, you know, traditionally there's been signature based security solutions. Here's something bad, we have a signature of it. If I see that, I'm going to stop it.
Mhm.
And that's the easiest way to stop something. It doesn't require a lot of necessarily expertise to be able to say, here's a hash of bad files, or here's a hash of bad URLs, or here's the signature of all these different viruses. I think to truly see if someone's utilizing AI properly is to really look at how they stack up against what we call zero-day threats. And zero-day threats are threats that have never been seen before and do not have signatures based on that. So, if I know, James, that you're a bad person, I'm not going to let you in my house because you're on a list somewhere. But if you're not on the list, how do I know if you're a bad person or not?
Right.
So AI has really accelerated that detection of what we call zero-day threats, of sort of the unknown threats. And if you could, there's lots of different third-party studies out there of being able to prevent those zero-day threats without having to let something bad happen and then say, okay, now I've created a signature for that. So, there was a recent test that Myricom did, and Checkpoint was 99.7% effective at protecting unknown or zero-day threats and preventing them, not just detecting them, where some other people, our next closest competitor in that study was probably around 60 to 70% of prevention of zero-day threats. So that delta really shows, how not only how seriously we take the prevention aspect of security, but also the effectiveness of our AI and all the different engines that feed our products and our solutions.
Well, all right. In that subject, let's take a moment and make sure that we've drilled down to Checkpoint itself. You certainly mentioned some of the solutions, but to sum it up, I mean, how is Checkpoint leveraging AI in its offerings? What's the Checkpoint advantage?
So our advantage is we've been doing, Checkpoint is 30 years old as of sometime this week, I believe. I don't know our official birthday, but it's in the next couple weeks here. So we've been around for 30 years. We've been developing security solutions and different algorithms and automation. We've been fully invested into artificial intelligence for a good 10 years, even before it was kind of a buzzword. And it's how we've been able to stay on top of the industry from a prevention standpoint of specifically zero-day threats. One of the other sort of side benefits of using AI is that when we kind of switch from machine learning into true artificial intelligence, not only did we still have the best industry prevention rate, which we've increased by 30% by kind of switching from machine learning to artificial intelligence, but even more importantly, we reduced our false positive rate by 90%, which is, not quite as important as the initial prevention rate, but it keeps people from responding to threats that aren't real. And if you have the boy who cried wolf too many times, when it's an actual real problem, you don't respond to it. And that's almost as dangerous as not catching and not preventing attacks in the first place. So when you do it, prevent something or alert on something, if it's a false positive, you're either disrupting business or you're wasting people's time, and your security solution gets in the way. So not only have we made our solutions more effective, but we've also made them more accurate.
Well, and I think that's a big problem with the security administrators, those false positives. I mean, nothing like causes them to tear their hair out more than the false positives. Huge amount of time wasted there. I want to sort of look ahead to the future, and I think companies are very concerned about the future of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Perhaps generative AI. We need to use the word generative AI because we can't do any interview without using that phrase. It's a very important phrase these days, as I'm sure you're aware. So what is the future of AI and/or generative AI and cybersecurity? What do you see in the next few years, Tom?
So again, this is where you start seeing, not only are the bad actors starting to use AI, but now that generative AI tools are somewhat freely and publicly available, ChatGPT and Google's Bard and a whole host of other different publicly available generative AI solutions out there, is your average hacking group doesn't have the R&D resources of a multi-billion-dollar multinational company like Checkpoint or a Microsoft, for example. But they do have access to generative AI at very low cost or cheap. So where we're initially seeing it from a pure cybersecurity standpoint is in the creation of things like phishing emails or writing code that doesn't use certain attributes that may make it look like it's malicious code. And a lot of these tools have safeguards built in, so you can't necessarily ask ChatGPT to say, write me a phishing email that's going to get past the top 10 security solutions. That's going to get blocked by ChatGPT, but there's very easy ways to trick it and say, hey, I'm looking for a persuasive email to get somebody to,
Right.
click on my marketing link, and then you just change the marketing link to a phishing email to change your password or something like that. And
Interesting. Right.
what's really kind of the game changer for the bad actors with generative AI is that we've all gotten phishing emails. Most of the time, they're not written by people who are speaking our language natively, or English in
Right.
this case, but even
Right.
in other languages. So when there's spelling and grammar mistakes, I'm pretty sure that Microsoft isn't going to be sending me or Apple's going to be sending me a password reset email with
Right.
poor grammar and misspellings.
Right.
And it's really helped the attackers, who tend not to be native speakers of the language they're trying to phish in,
Right.
have more natural language, and allows them to customize it too, where your average hacking group isn't going to know 80 languages, but ChatGPT does. So I can do it in Chinese, I can do it in French, I can do it in Spanish, I can do it in English, I could do it in Portuguese, I could do it in Turkish, or whatever language you want, and specifically target individuals by using things like artificial intelligence and the generative AIs like ChatGPT. Not only are we using AI to help strengthen the prevention and detection engines, but now that we've introduced AI even into the policy decision making of, when you look at things like IoT, all the different connected devices that are in everybody's organization, there's
Right.
no way that an organization can create policies for all that by hand and then implement them. We're using AI to actually generate the security policies for an organization to say, hey, I need to be GDPR compliant, or I need to be PCI compliant, or I need to follow these NIST standards or ISO 27001. I can actually use AI to create policies to say, okay, here's an IP camera. It knows the manufacturer, it knows how it should communicate, what its baseline traffic is, and automatically create these policies. So the other sort of buzzword is zero trust, using AI to create your zero trust policies and actually getting them enforced without humans having to create those policies by themselves. And that's another big usage of AI in cybersecurity. It's not just in the fancy, detection and prevention sort of threat engines, but also in the creating the policy perspective across the organization.
Interesting. Well said, and so a lot of good stuff, Tony. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please do come back again and share with us again. I hope so.
Anytime, James, and thanks for the time today.